George, Watford, and it is April 27th, 1994. Well, Mr. Watford, how old were you when you joined the Army Air Corps?
I joined in, I think, March of 42, after Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41. And I was 21 years old, almost 21 years old. I'm 73 now, last 7th of April. I joined out of college, Texas Tech, along with about 150 other students. Joined the Air Corps, volunteer, to be called when ready and under the student program. I finished that year at Tech and worked that summer at home, near home, and went back to school, entered school around the 1st of September, and on the 13th of September, I believe, I got a wire from the Army saying you will report to San Antonio in about a week, I believe, for assignment and induction in the Army, active duty. And since I was one of about 150 who'd signed up on the same program, there was intense interest in the rest of the schools when their telegrams were coming. Why? They all lined up outside my dormitory to read my telegram. And next day I reported, this was in Lubbock, next day I reported in Lubbock, induction office, small branch office there. And I asked them why the other boys hadn't been called, and they said, well, they're on the deferred student list and you're on the call when ready list. And I said, well, that's fine, I'll go ahead. And I went back out to school, and the Dean of Engineering, I was an engineering student, Dean Adams, said, very interested in what was happening. Many of these boys were engineering students. He said, Watford, we can get you out of this, we can get you deferred. I said, no, I'm ready, I don't want to be deferred. And several reasons I was ready. First place, the war was going on. Also, I was taking thermodynamics, and it was a pretty damn tough course. I was kind of glad to get away from it. And so I went ahead and reported to San Antonio in September of 42. And an interesting sidelight to all of this is that I went through pre-flight, flight training, 2/3 of the way through flight training before I washed out as a pilot. Went back and was reassigned as a bombardier, went through gunner school, bombardier school, joined a crew, assembled a crew, so we were assembled together. Flew to England, flew 35 missions, came home 6 months before the war in Germany or in Europe was over, and longer than that, of course, before the Japanese War was over. And typical of those who remained behind, this other 150 people, they were called in February and went through the CTD, College Training Attachment situation. My roommate was a pilot candidate. John Albert became a pilot on B-29. John went through the necessary training, transition school and so forth. Went overseas and flew 5 missions on B-29 before the Japanese surrender. Well, that's how much difference September to February made in that context.
When you were washed out of pilot school, what washed you out?
I had completed primary training in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Went to Independence, Kansas for basic training, which was the middle of the 3 classes, 3 types of training. And had about 8 or 10 hours. I was having a little trouble flying the plane. It flew like a rock, I thought, the BT-14, which I basically an underpowered AT-6 and a ground loop type plane. It much more difficult to fly, I thought, than the bulky BT-13 where most people train. But most of them were flying it, and I can fly it. But I developed ear infection when I had about 10 hours, 9 or 10 hours before I'd soloed. And I was stood down for about 3 weeks. And my ear healed, burst, eardrum burst. Came back and I was, of course, way behind. And I changed instructors. The new instructor was not confident I could fly the plane, and I had a total of about 20 hours, I guess, before I soloed. He didn't want me to solo, period. I told him, hell, I'll solo. He said, you'll kill yourself. I said, no, I won't. If I do, well, you'll be well rid of me. So he finally let me solo. I flew 2.5 hours solo in that plane. Took it up and spun it and did several things I shouldn't have done. But anyway, I got away and got back alive. I hit the ground while he put me up for elimination ride. He told me that, and I went to talk to his superiors. He told me, well, we can, after a couple of the rides, I gave one real good ride and one forward. And he said, you know, we can wash you out or wash you back. And I said, please just wash me back. He said, you've got high enough grades to be bombardier navigator, we'll just go ahead and wash you out. And there wasn't any, begging didn't do any good. From there, they sent me to San Antonio for reassignment at what was called Tent City, where they were with a Kelly, and Kelly was a pre-flight school and had about 5,000 pilot pre-flight trainees and about 2,000 washed out bombardiers on the far end of the field, washed out pilots. Waiting reassignment. And we lived in tents with wooden floors, little tent with, there were lots of us. So happened that I had been cadet leader in basic training. And when I arrived in San Antonio, I was selected by the Air Corps captain who was in charge to be the head cadet officer there, which I had no stomach for the job, but he explained to me that I'd get a 3-day pass if I took the job, and otherwise I'd never get a pass, so I took the job. And that was the most interesting job, may have been the most interesting job I ever had. Those fellows had absolutely zero morale, and none of them was interested in the Army and the Army discipline. And it was my job to develop them, and by the time we left a couple of months later, we finally won the competition between the pre-flight cadets and us for parade and inspection, which was a monumental achievement, really, and extremely interesting.
What type of aircraft did you train in as a bombardier?
I believe it was a BT-11 twin boom tail aircraft. About I guess I don't know who made the aircraft.
Would it have been an AT-11 or Cessna?
BT-13 or BT. And that wasn't an AT-11, I don't believe. It was a BT plane.
It was a twin engine, little plane.
Yeah, a little twin engine. Small twin engine. I can't think of what would be equivalent to it right now.
Were you considered a master bombardier at that time?
Well, we had a class of about, I believe about 120 people. in my class. They calculate circular error, distance from the circle average, circle being zero, target, average bombing result. We bombed from 12,000 feet, and they calibrated to 20,000. They used a formula to calibrate it to 20,000 feet. My circular error average was 170 feet. The lowest average in our group was, I believe, 135 feet, and the highest was 233 or 234 or something like that. I was a good bombardier. We had one other requirement. We had to drop, I believe, 12 out of 50 low altitude bombs within the target range, which was not done with the bomb sight, which was done with a very primitive, almost aiming over your toe type situation where you're bringing the plane in with automatic pilot. I had a little trouble with that. Finally, I got smart enough to do that and did it well. But I felt pretty confident it was. We were using, of course, the northern bomb sight normally. And 170 feet from center of the target, calibrated 20,000 feet, pretty close.
You also went through gunnery school in September of '43?
Yes, after reassigned as a bombardier candidate, I went to gunnery school in Kingman, Arizona, which certainly in the top 5 of the least desirable places in the United States from the standpoint of most everything. In the desert out there, in yucca plants, one thing, nothing going on except we were learning how to shoot air to air and on the ground. It was interesting. We were there about 5 or 6 weeks, I believe. Trained pretty concentrated training.
What type of aircraft did you train in, and what type of guns were you using?
We were using 50 caliber generally, and they had us practice shooting out of calibrated turrets run by electricity, shooting shotgun shells out of moving targets and moving clay pigeons. Pretty interesting. And the planes were, I believe those were AT-11. Those planes. They were a little faster than the planes we'd had before, and also they put on targets on them, sleeve targets. We had to, usually had, every 5th round would be a tracer round, so you could have some idea of where you were shooting. Pretty interesting experience. I was glad to have it, glad to get out of it, finish it. Went from there to Victorville, California for advanced bombardier training, which consisted of first training in hangars with mock-up airplanes, I guess you'd call them, but they were built like trapezoids on wheels and closed in, whether you had the same view as you would from a bomb sight in an airplane. And electrically, you would bomb to try to hit a target, which was on a piece of paper on a metal disc out in front of you. We've got several problems in bombing. One of them is to the effort is to set your drive mechanism on your telescope or on your scope you're looking through, so that it is traveling at the same, unwinding or winding at the same speed as you approach the target. What that means is your horizontal crosshair put it on the center of the target, and it'll move off if you don't have your motor set at the same speed you're approaching it. Or you set your motor to where the horizontal crosshair stays on the target. Then you have the vertical crosshair, which is involved with drift, which in wind drifts you over the target, and you set that to where it stays on the target. And the crosshairs cross on the center of the target and stay there. And by doing that, as you do that, you set the indexes which control the release of the bomb. And eventually, when the bombs are released, you release them properly. You have to figure out the trail, how much friction on that and so forth, and all that's done by charts and what little slide rule we call E6B. And it's not all that difficult, but
How much time, once you approached your target, how much time did you get to make all these calculations and drop your bombs?
varied, but in combat, normally anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. We always hoped it would be 5, 6, 7, or 8, because once you hit that area, you had to fly straight and level, and the bombardier took control of the airplane via autopilot. And you couldn't do evasive action, so when you had a 30-minute IP initial point, long ways, you went sliding in there and could be fired on.
After you got your orders, how did you get to England?
We were ordered to take a new plane, a B-17, which we issued to us. We flew from Rapid City, South Dakota to Kearney, Nebraska, to a base in New Hampshire. We stayed overnight each of those two bases. And we flew from that New Hampshire base to a base in Labrador, stayed all night there. Flew into Greenland and spent the night there. We were in Greenland on July the 4th of 43. And several things about Greenland were interesting. The approach to Greenland had several fjords approaching it, which consisted of a width of water bounded on each side by hills or mountains. And as you approach closer to the Greenland Glacier, eventually you got so close you're going to hit the glacier or have to land unless you could turn around. And in some of those fjords you couldn't turn around; they were too narrow. So they advised us which one to try to go up, which we did. It's the navigator's job to do that, my job to help him visually. And they said if you get in the right one, when you get X distance up it, you should see a ship, a sailing ship on the bottom of the sea. The sea is very clear. And we did. We saw the ship. We knew we were in the right fjord. And we came on up the fjord about another 10 minutes and landed on the southern tip of Greenland at what they call Bluey West 1, the name of the base. Which, we landed on an airstrip, had about a 10-degree angle up, steel mat. And if you overshot, you had about a 11,000-foot glacier ahead of you. So you tried to land as close to the water as possible and go on up, and we did successfully. We landed there. First words I heard in Greenland was, we pulled around and follow me truck and parked. He parked us. Another fellow came up in a Jeep, I guess, got out, ran over to the plane, and we had let down either Black or I, the navigator, I had let down the entrance between the two pilots where we were going to get out along with them. This fella stuck his head up there and he said, if you got any bourbon, I'll give you $50 a fit. And we had flown up there empty. We were disappointed. We hadn't been entrepreneurs enough to foresee that. But we didn't. The other thing that was interesting about Greenland was that the sun stayed up almost 24 hours. Stayed up about 22 hours on July the 4th. Appeared only to be about 6 feet above the horizon. Went around, all the way around, finally got ready to go down. It dipped under the horizon for about 2 hours and came back up. The base had 5,000 men and 26 women, 24 nurses and 2 Red Cross girls, all of which probably became wealthy. But we went up to the officers club that night, which to simulate dark, they had extremely heavy black curtains all over it. And they had a perennial crap game going on up there next to the bar, away from the bar, which I immediately got into, as I shortly did. And I had won a good bit of money playing 2-bit limit poker, so I felt pretty flush. And I was covering all bets, and nobody was winning except me. I was fading everybody. Finally, a guy got dice, and he said, "I'll shoot 10." I covered it. Another man said, "I'll shoot 5 with him." Another man 10 with him. Another man 20 with him. And finally, I realized I had about $100 riding on this one roll he was going to make, and I thought, I wonder who this guy is. They got a lot of confidence in him. We were shooting on a pool table about the size of this conference table, and had a light low enough to where you couldn't easily see the faces of people around. He was on one end, I was on the other end, and there were people all the way between us. And I leaned down and looked up under the light to see who it was, and he had a big chaplain's bar. Well, they believed in him, but he didn't make it.